My name is Jamie. And about 5-6 years ago, I noticed I was starting to feel tired. And so I just thought I have three small children, very like 2 years apart, that was just a normal mom thing. And not so much, because as time progressed, I just felt more tired and more tired. So for me, doing household chores, that was a big deal because I was just so exhausted. For different reasons, my husband and I decided to cyber school our kids. And I was so exhausted that I would wake up in the morning. I was exhausted like most people are exhausted at like 3 p.m. I would just wake up that way. And I would lay on the couch and I would do my best to cyber school our kids. And then when my husband would come home about 3:30, I would go right to bed. I was so tired. I would go to bed, and he would do all of our household chores and do dinners. He'd wake me up, I'd eat, and I'd go back to bed. And then I'd wake up the next morning and I would just do the same thing. I would just repeat this over and over again. I went to 3 different doctors who told me I was depressed and wanted to give me some medicines to treat that. So I just knew this wasn't in my head. There was a physical problem going on that nobody was getting to. I will say the kicker for me to go to holistic medicine was whenever my oldest daughter asked me at one time, she asked me if I was dying. And at that point, it was a money thing. Like, it didn't matter what amount of money I needed to get that fixed. Okay, so what happened was I ended up going to a holistic doctor, a holistic MD, who, this was the explanation I got. My thyroid was working, but I was unable to convert what my thyroid was producing into energy. So my thyroid was working on Western medicine's low normal, which is why they kept saying there's nothing wrong with me. And my thyroid produces T4 gets converted to T3, and then my T3 doesn't get converted to energy. So this is why I'm on the couch all the time, can't do anything. So simple solution was that he gave me T3, a hormone called T3. Let me tell you, I would have paid thousands of dollars to have seen this doctor, because I was off the couch and I've had energy ever since. So since 5 years ago, I've been on this T3. It's kept me off the couch. I'm like able to do stuff. It's been absolutely wonderful. But what led me to Dr. Colin was I'm noticing that even though I have energy, but I was just completely and utterly emotionally unstable, which is really funny. I say that after I've cried, right, in front of everybody. But so what would happen is I was just crying every day over the most ridiculous reasons. So going back to the first doctor, the first holistic doctor, I didn't want to afford him. I didn't want to pay for him. Because it was out of pocket money. And so when I met Dr. Colin, I didn't want to afford him either. But the truth is, that first doctor, I would have paid thousands to get off of that couch. So if the hope that Dr. Colin was offering me worked, it was so worth the little bit of money that he was requiring for me to see him. So I went and saw him, and I'm just going to tell you guys, I have not, like, the last time I took a T3 pill, it was the day before Mother's Day. And the reason I don't take it anymore is because I don't need it. I honestly don't need it. If I take it now, it's like I'm on speed. It like drives me crazy because I'm on speed. It speeds me out. So I don't even need it anymore. And I don't have crashes through my day. Like, I have the same amount of energy at 3 p.m. as I do at 8 o'clock in the morning when I wake up. There's no ups and downs. So he's just really been like a huge blessing in my life in getting me back to feeling normal. Like, I just haven't felt this, and it's been years since I have felt this normal.
I grew up under the care of a chiropractor. My father's a chiropractor. He practices in White Oak, Pennsylvania. And I was very, very healthy, growing up. He was my primary care provider. And it wasn't until I was about maybe 13, 14, 15 years old, where I developed a very serious skin condition. Basically, it looked like ringworm, and it started in my arm and moved up my arm and actually went onto my chest and was on my nipples, which is one, very embarrassing, and two, extremely painful. So what happened was is we went to a bunch of different, general chiropractic care didn't work, and we went to a bunch of different healthcare providers, dermatologists, MDs, DOs, all kind of doctors, and the only thing that they could tell me was to take steroids to get rid of the issue. And the problem with the steroid is, and my dad educated me on this, was that it would demineralize my bone, and it would also completely wipe out my immune system. And that's not something that you want as a very active young male, because my bones would be broken and I'd be very, very sick. So I waited and I didn't take the steroids, and my skin got worse and worse and worse. And I had it for about 12 years. I suffered with this, which was, kind of mentally damaging, because you're a growing, young man. And I couldn't really go out much. I was very embarrassed. I was very shy, and I just waited. And then eventually what happened was my dad came across a nutritional program called nutrition response testing. And we got into that, which is a full-blown system of how to help and pinpoint specific conditions within the body. And for me, I actually found out that I had a parasitic infection in my liver. And because the liver is a detoxifying organ, it wasn't able to do its job. It was just backed up by a parasitic infection. It was trying to detoxify itself. It couldn't detoxify my body, and the toxins were actually coming out through my skin. And that was the reason for my skin issue. And so what we did was we cleared out the parasitic infection from my liver. It took 2 years, but it was totally worth it, because now I have no skin issues. And wintertime was when it was the worst, and don't have any problems now with that. My liver is completely healed up, cellular wise, and it's great. And the medical profession wouldn't have been able to find that unless they did a biopsy of my liver and pulled out parasitic tissue, which that would be extremely rare for them to recommend doing a test like that. So I'm very, very grateful for it. That's just one of the things that we do here. We do a bunch of other things, which we'll probably end up discussing here in a couple minutes. So usually when you go to a chiropractor, you can expect two things. One would be, of course, chiropractic adjustment. And the second one would be some sort of muscle work. And those are two extremely important things. They help a ton of people. And my profession, I'm a chiropractor, of course, does extremely well at that. But sometimes you need a little bit more. And that's what we do. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at, and what Dr. Sarah Vivona does that also works here, is we're looking at 3 primary stressors of the body. So there's structural stress, which is like, you fall and injure yourself, muscle, bone stuff, things like that. There's chemical stress, which is anything that you put into your body or anything that your body can't eliminate or produces too much of. And then there's also mental and emotional stress. So all of these stresses are equally important, and they accumulate. So they build up upon one another. And eventually you reach kind of like a threshold. And everyone's threshold is at a different height, you can say. So what happens is, if you get above that, if you get the stress and it gets above that threshold level, you're going to develop a symptom. And the symptom can be anything. It can be like, headaches, migraines, digestive issues. It could be muscle and joint pain. It could be something as bad as cancer. Those are all just symptoms. They're basically alarms going off telling you that something is not functioning well in the body. If you have cancer, something is definitely not functioning well in the body. So what we do is we work to reduce those stressors below that threshold level, so that you no longer have your symptom, and the disease is still, again, a symptom, and we reduce it below that threshold level, so that and we continue to reduce it down, so that whenever you do become stressed again, or you injure yourself, or you're mentally emotional stressed, it doesn't send you above that threshold again to experience that symptom. So how we go about correcting those 3 stresses is something different. We're looking at all systems of the body. We're looking at the nervous system, so that's the wiring of your body. your lymphatic system, which is like the garbage disposal system of your body. You don't want to be bathing in your own toxins internally. So it's very important to get these things flushed out. We're looking at, the blood flow of the body, cardiovascular system, the cerebral spinal fluid in the body, which is like the blood of the nervous system, which is extremely important, and also the acupuncture meridian system. We deal with that. We're looking at nutrition on a chemical aspect, and also do something called neuro-emotional technique, which handles the emotional aspect of that as well. So all those things, those are all incorporated into our treatments here.
One of the main differences that I thought was really odd that you do is that he really does address your emotions. Mm-hmm. And so during a visit, he does this technique to figure out emotionally. Like, I came in and he would say, oh, well, there's something wrong with your gallbladder or your liver, and that correlated to this emotion. And then he would tell me, so what happened at this time of your life with this emotion and on this subject? And the coolest thing is there was really something wrong with that emotion in that period of time with that specific subject.
Yeah, it's called neuro-emotional technique. It's extremely powerful. There's scientific research on it. You can go on netmindbody.com and you can look at the different research studies that they've done with MRIs in the brain before and after. It's really great stuff. Helps out a lot.
You've never done a blood test on me?
Nope, not needed.
Okay.
So you don't need blood work to figure things out if you know how the body is wired up and connected. So every part of you can think of every part of your body. Your body is a system, so everything relates or correlates to something else in the body. So you can tap in. You could use muscle testing basically as a window to what's going on within your system. So each muscle is linked up or wired to an organ system. So typically what you'd find is with a thyroid, since we're talking about thyroid a little bit here, with a thyroid issue, you have a muscle called your teres minor that's attached to it or linked to it. And that's a muscle that's on the back of your shoulder, connects from your shoulder to your shoulder blade. So you can test the strength, neurological strength of that muscle, and it can be an indicator. You can see, well, why isn't this muscle functioning properly? Is it because the thyroid isn't working properly? Is it because the acupuncture meridian system that's linked up to it isn't working properly? Is it because the thyroid may need a nutrient that's associated with that muscle? Is it the muscle itself? You can get into all these different things and figure out why that particular muscle isn't working right. So, you can just talk to someone or a patient symptom-wise, and they can tell you that they have shoulder pain. Well, that shoulder pain could actually be stemming from a thyroid issue because that muscle is directly linked to it. So we're working with the whole body like that instead of looking at specific blood work and blood tests to determine what you need, because a lot of times the blood work isn't 100% accurate, and they're just looking for disease states. They're not looking for how well something is functioning. So we want to restore the function. We don't want to wait until you have a disease to try to correct what's been going on for a long period of time.
You didn't take me off my T3.
No, I can't. It's not my job to.
But I'm not taking T3. So now somebody say on Synthroid, because I have a lot of my ladies are on Synthroid and high doses of Synthroid. Mm-hmm. So if they were to come to you, you're not going to take them off the Synthroid either.
No, I will never remove any medication. It would be unlawful for me to do so because I'm not studied and I don't have a license to practice pharmacology. So I have no interest in it either. But what happens is once we start to restore the function of your body and everything kind of builds up and re-regulates itself, your body's no longer going to need that artificial stimulation, and it's going to tell you when you no longer need it. So you'll start having symptoms like she was having hyperthyroid symptoms. So, she was getting too much T3. That was way too much energy, way too much metabolic activity for her body. So her body was saying, hey, look, we don't need this anymore. Your thyroid is doing it on its own. So sometimes that's what's happening. A lot of times you'll be on maybe a nutritional program or a program with me or Dr. Vivona, and you'll go to your medical doctor, and your thyroid levels will need to are ultimately changing, and they're going to need to continue to reduce your thyroid, the amount of thyroid medication to match their blood work, because that's what they do. They're always trying to get the blood work stable or stabilized and in the proper ranges. So your thyroid levels may be too high, they're going to reduce it down and down and down. So each consecutive visit, you're going to need less and less medication, and then eventually they're going to have no choice but to take you off of it because it's no longer needed, because we've restored the function of the thyroid. What we try to do is keep that at a bare minimum, because my job, of course, is not to sell supplements. If I could do it without supplements, that would be amazing. But unfortunately, just because of what we're currently eating in our culture, it does take minerals and nutrients out of our body, and we are not replacing it with what we need. And it's just the way our food system's set up right now. It's conventional, but not very good. So what we try to do to avoid that as best we can, taking a lot of supplements, is we start with working with you structurally. So we're working with everything. If we're dealing with thyroid, because that's, again, what we're talking about, then we're going to look at the muscles, the wiring to the thyroid, the muscles that are linked to it. We're going to look at all those different systems that I had mentioned: cerebral spinal fluid, cardiovascular, lymphatic system. Make sure you're not very toxic. Make sure all these things are working properly. And then if we need to work on your diet, then what we'll do is give you very specific dietary recommendations while providing your body with exactly what it needs to heal and repair the thyroid tissue. Now, sometimes on a chemical level, what we find is there is an immune system issue going on with the thyroid, which would need to be addressed. There's a chemical toxin or two. There's a heavy metal or two. Any one of these things, are food sensitivity. Whenever you eat a specific food, it downregulates the function of your thyroid. So we need to determine that and detoxify very specifically whatever that chemical, metal, or immune system issue may be, while providing the thyroid with what it needs. So sometimes it can take some supplements to get there. Starting with a structural correction and mental and emotional correction will kind of keep us from painting over rust with supplements. But a lot of times they are necessary. I only give them to you whenever they are absolutely necessary, but working with the diet is also huge when it comes to the thyroid as well.
This one is my favorite story to tell people about my visits with you, because I think it was probably like my third visit here, and I came to Dr. Collin with, I think I probably just had one rule, and my one rule was that he not take me off this T3. Yeah. I'm not quite sure why that was such a problem. I didn't even care, because that was the only thing that was keeping me off that couch. Mm-hmm. So my only stimulation was, are you gonna take me off this T3? And he said, no, we're not gonna take us T3. But lo and behold, I think like my third visit, and I gotta tell you, it's so funny, because I can't remember, I called you one time. Mm-hmm. I called him one time, and the conversation kind of went like, hi Jamie, this is Dr. Collin, how are you? And I said, oh, I'm great. Not really, I'm freaking out, I'm having an anxiety attack. I mean, I'm dead set in an anxiety attack, because I was speeding. I was just jittery and going crazy. It was the T3. That's what it was the T3. Now I remember. And he's, Dr. Collin just walked me through that this was normal. This is just part of the process. It was my body telling me I didn't want the T3 anymore. My head wanted the T3, but my body was over it. So I just want everyone to be encouraged. Like, when you come in here, you're not going to come see Dr. Collin for a thyroid issue and be bombarded with do's, don'ts, shoulds, and shouldn'ts when it comes to food.
It's all, and it's all gradiently to what you can handle. So we always gear it to what you can do as quickly as you can do it. And everyone's different. So I can tell you exactly how you should eat if you have a thyroid issue. And give you everything all at once. But what we find whenever we do that is people think it's impossible. So what you want to do is gradiently get to the point, and make the changes where you're noticing some good positive changes, and keep eating the way that you're eating in that positive state. And then, hey, maybe we don't need to change anything else. If something else needs to be done, then we go a little bit more and more and more, keep making the changes until you are where you need to be. And ultimately, what we're doing again is we're just doing it to restore the function of the body, and you will feel the difference. And we're not here to kind of torture you on eating. It's just to give your body what it needs to heal and repair itself.
Dr. Cullen would say, so how are you doing with, these supplements? And I would say, well, I've only done half of them, or, I did do this, I didn't do that. Mm-hmm. And he's so cool about just accepting what I was comfortable with. And so the funny thing is we actually skipped over it. My favorite appointment was whenever I was taking this T3. It was after the phone call I was telling you guys about, this anxiety phone call, and he's, reassuring me that, yes, my body is not needing this T3 anymore. And I came for my next appointment, and I'm saying, I'm freaking out, right? Like I don't understand what's happening with my body, that I don't need this T3. Why did this anxiety happen? And it was so hard for me to let go of that T3. And Dr. Cullen honestly looked at me and said, listen, he said, my job is to get you better as quickly as possible, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're not ready for that, I could slow that process down if you need to. And I literally looked at him and said, yeah, we need to do that, right? Yeah. Like, we need to slow this process down because it was too fast for me. It's just, and then it didn't happen that way because my body was just reacting so well.
Mm-hmm. That you healed up very quickly, which was great.
And so how often, for thyroid issues, mm-hmm. what is a normal length of time before people start seeing results?
So everyone is completely different in regards to that. A lot of times it's very fast. Sometimes it's slower. So what we're ultimately trying to do, so with you, if you don't mind me saying, okay. So with Jamie, what we did was her thyroid was actually functioning fine. There were just some things impeding that function, so not allowing that to function properly. And it was slightly chemical and primarily emotional. So we worked with
I didn't know that.
A lot of emotional stuff, and it was kind of subconscious stuff that was keeping her body from functioning properly. And then just she needed that mineral for a very short period of time just to give her thyroid a boost. And then everything was normal. Her body did what it needed to do. Now, sometimes if you have a very long chronic condition and you have a known, thyroid disease like Hashimoto's or something like that, it takes a little bit longer because what we're ultimately trying to do with organ systems is we're trying to work to heal and restore them on a cellular level. So it's pretty interesting. In each cell in our body has what's called apoptosis, so it's like programmed cell death. So over a period of time, every cell in our body will die and will be replaced by a new cell. So what happens is it's just like a plant. If a plant has exactly what it needs to grow and it has nothing irritating it, it's going to grow perfectly. It has perfect soil, perfect nutrients. The same thing happens with our cells. So like I said, if you have an issue more, and it's usually more chemically based with the thyroid, if you have like a heavy metal affecting the thyroid tissue, that first needs to be removed from the system, and then we need to work on giving the thyroid exactly what it needs to heal and repair itself, because ultimately what's happening is we're giving the thyroid what it needs, the cells are dying, and they're being replaced. And if there's no metal there or other chemical substance that's affecting the way those cells are functioning, and the cells have exactly what they need to produce a perfect cell, to grow properly, you're going to produce a perfect cell. So cells are going to die and be replaced and be replaced until you actually have a brand new organ system. So it's like organ system replacement ultimately. And that can take some time. And it can take some time for especially a thyroid, because that's a gland, and glands take a little bit longer. So every individual is different. It's not necessarily a quick fix. We're, again, working to restore the function. But once that's restored, unless you go and mess it up again, it stays like that forever. Just like my liver, it took me 2 years. I had a nasty parasitic infection that needed to be eradicated from my body, and my liver cells all needed to be replaced until it started functioning perfectly again. So I am not very expensive compared to other practitioners in the area.
Like not at all, just saying. I would have paid more knowing now how well I feel. I would have paid more than he is. But every time I tell people how much you really are, they're everybody says, "Oh my, it's crazy. It's crazy."
So what we try to do is, my purpose is to help as many people as possible heal and regain their health naturally. So to do that, I'm not going to charge a ton of money. We try to keep it so that you can get better, because that's my ultimate purpose here. That's what I'm out to do. And I hope that you take advantage of that. We typically start with the applied kinesiology, which is basically like the form of chiropractic that we practice here. And you can look that up. It's icakusa.com. Very intelligent group of doctors. They have meetings for doctors around the whole entire world. And actually in Europe, it's primarily practiced by medical practitioners. Here, it's primarily chiropractors. But that's where we start, because it's like throwing the net out and catching the most stuff. So fixing the most, the greatest amount of issues in the body. And then if there are some strictly chemical things that we need to work with in the body and you really need some zeroed in help, then a nutritional program would be right for you. And I would explain, or Dr. Vivona would explain that to you once you're here, because everyone's different. And we use a very dynamic system. No one is ever on the same treatment plan at all. It's never the same thing over and over again. Each visit is 100% different than the one before. So it's just all about you and what you need. And really anything, because kind of like what I explained in the beginning, what we're doing is we're restoring the function of the body. When the function's restored, all alarms or all symptoms will go away. So that could be anything. Chasing symptoms never works. It never has. It's what medicine is doing right now. You're basically spraying the alarms. You're not putting out the fire. So we're working to put out the fire. And that could be anything, literally. It could be digestive stuff. It could be back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, arm pain, any sort of pain. It could be migraines, like systemic dysfunction, like labels like fibromyalgia, things like that. Really anything. Where once the function is being restored in the body, the alarms shut off and you start to regain your health.
So colds,
flus,
UTIs.
What I do with those is I work to restore the immune system. We don't treat the infection directly. We have treated chemically babies in the womb. And our oldest patient that we've had here at this center has been 98. So very, very young and the very, very old.
I go to Dr. Colin over Dr. Sarah because I met Dr. Colin. Dr. Sarah just wasn't where I was. But it's super cool that she's here. So if they're, I know like teenage girls are probably more comfortable with Dr. Sarah. Not that they have to be. I just wanted to let any of the ladies know that Dr. Sarah's here, and she's a girl. It's a girl, and she does the same thing you do, right? Yep. And so if you're more comfortable there, she's there, and she does videos. She does food videos to teach you guys how to make smoothies and
all kind of stuff. Yeah, we have a YouTube page and you can see all of that. Of course, it's free. We're just here to educate you and help you out. So we're doing all that we can and put as much information out as we can to do that for you guys.
Thanks for tuning in.
Yep, thanks.